The map of the world is a lot stranger than you think it is, especially this map. You've probably seen it a lot in classrooms or office buildings, but this map is extremely, very badly wrong. Everything is bigger in Texas, but what is Texas itself bigger than? Moving the borders over to Europe, the answer may surprise you. Texas is much bigger than Spain and Portugal put together, and is also even bigger than France. But Texas is only the second biggest US state behind Alaska, which seems absolutely gargantuan at the top of our map. But while Alaska is large, it isn't that large. Taken down to the US mainland, it compares like this, and taken to Europe, it looks like this. And while we're here in Europe, let's take the time to understand how much bigger Europe seems than what it actually should be. Let's start by taking France and moving it down to Africa to get our first glimpse at this. The United Kingdom seems pretty large as well, but let's take India and move it over to see just how small it really is. The United Kingdom is actually smaller than quite a lot of places in the world that you might not expect. Places like Japan, the Philippines, Sumatra, Madagascar, and New Zealand. Next door to New Zealand is Australia, and the UK looks so small just off the east coast in comparison. And Australia, in fact, is much bigger than most people believe it to be. It can be placed to cover almost the entire continental US. Interestingly, the combination of the following countries will not cover that same area: Portugal, the Netherlands, Estonia, Albania, Hungary, Belgium, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Austria, Croatia, Latvia, the Czech Republic, Serbia, Switzerland, Slovakia, Lithuania, Denmark, Ireland, Greece, Bulgaria, Romania, the United Kingdom, Italy, Germany, France, Spain, and Norway. And that's not even factoring in big but not too big Alaska to the north. Between Alaska and the United States is Canada, which also seems huge up here. And while Canada is a very large country, it's actually roughly the same size as China, but still looks like a colossus when placed in Europe, where it stretches from east to west to Portugal to Iran and up north into the Barents Sea just above of Russia. Slightly off topic, Japan is another bigger place than most people believe it to be. If Japan were placed off the US East Coast, it would look like this in comparison. But much, much bigger than Japan, and also not often thought about, is Brazil, which is an absolutely massive country. It doesn't really look like it on our map, but when we move it to Australia, we can actually discover that Brazil is much bigger, which makes Brazil larger than one of the world's 7 continents. Brazil is also almost larger than the United States, spans almost all of Europe, but fits rather snugly into Africa. We are about to discover that Africa is a colossal continent that we don't often realize. It can almost fit the entire contiguous United States into just the Sahara Desert, and the continent can also squeeze in China, Western Europe, India, Argentina, Scandinavia, and the UK, and still have some room left over. Russia is another place that looks pretty big at the top of the map, but dropped down next to Africa, she also seems much smaller than what our map was telling us beforehand. While we're still here in Africa, the Democratic Republic of the Congo used to be a colony of Belgium, but Belgium in comparison looks like this. Finally, we need to look at a few other places on the map to the north and the south. Let's start with Sweden, which looks big, but comparing it to Madagascar again, we see that it actually isn't. Iceland also seems like a large island, but it's actually roughly the same size as Tasmania, just south of Australia. And finally, we have the white elephant in the room of Greenland, which towers like a behemoth at the top of the map. Greenland masquerades as being a continent in her own right, looking bigger than Australia, South America, and being comparable to North America. But in reality, Greenland is much, much smaller compared to Australia, South America, and North America. Antarctica, much bigger than Australia. It can stretch all the way from Kiev to Uganda, and incredibly, can be placed between the southernmost tip of Texas in the United States and stretch all the way into the northernmost islands of Canada. There are many more examples like this, but you've probably understood the point by now. The world is both a bigger place and a smaller place than you previously thought it to be.
Hello and welcome to Tricks of the S-Trade channel. Today is the 7th of May 2018. After speaking with the team for a bit, we decided to make a Primer Part 2 video, and I think this will be the final Primer Part video that we're going to make on this particular channel. So to start this Primer Part 2 video off, when we started this channel, and when we started this channel, it was just sitting with a group of friends, and because we've been watching YouTube, because for example, I can speak of myself and not particularly about the team at this point. My whole life's journey has always been about truth. So since the day I was born, the day I could breathe, I was very curious about my world, curious about understanding life and understanding the why things happen, understanding the nature of life, while certain people die, certain people live, while trying to understand as much as possible about why some people can be broken and some are healthy. If there was a God, what was his reason for creating human beings, and all that kind of stuff. Just asking questions and trying to understand life in general. And from the day I was born, I was curious about nature, about how things grew, and about how a lot of things are, like the sun, the moon, the stars, and everything else. Always wondering and always asking questions. So I grew up in a Catholic household. I went to Catholic schools, and I interacted with a lot of priests and interacted with a lot of people who are of Catholic origin. My dad and my mom, siblings, uncles, aunties, nephews, nieces, being all Roman Catholic, and asking so many questions. In school, I was considered someone who was very bright, and I also played a lot of sports as well. So I was very much in the athletics and everything else that you could put your hands to. I played almost every sport, from football to soccer to basketball to tennis, and anything that you could name out there. I played a lot of games as well. And all of this was still trying to understand life. So I was one of those weird, I wouldn't say I was a weird kid, but other kids would consider me to be weird in school, being that I tended not to have a lot of friends because I couldn't understand human nature. I could understand how someone could be your friend for a minute, and then in the next minute turn out to be so angry or hurtful or do certain things to you. So growing up that way, it made me kind of not a reclusive, because I got to understand that in the world that we live in, that man cannot live alone, because there are a lot of people who live a reclusive life. But I think that if you've studied your Bible and you come to understand the nature of the world, is that nobody was created to be alone. We were created to have meaningful relationships with one another. Now, because of how I found out human nature to be, that human nature wasn't very trustworthy, I decided after, that it wasn't really worthwhile my putting my whole beings into having relationships with people, that I should rather be reserved, that I should rather manage the relationships. So that's the best way I could put it. So what I set out to do was, since I found out, for example, that human nature couldn't be trusted and that human nature always disappoints you, and I made up a plan that instead of trying to get as much a great relationship as I can from people, I should rather try to give much the best of my part, the best of my own life into any relationship that I had, instead of trying to wait and believe that the person that I'm having a relationship with, in whatsoever way, shape, or form, will give to me all that he or she can, rather that I should be the one doing that. So I should not be worrying about what I get from them, but what more can I give to them. So when I came to this conclusion, I got over the fact that human nature couldn't be trusted. I would just maybe take whatever that was presented to me and run with it, and not worry so much about if it comes out right or if it comes out wrong. And since then, I started to make meaningful relationships with a lot of people, but not relationship that I would say base my whole life or experiences on, but more the fact about what I could give than more than what I could get. From that way, I saved myself from a lot of heartache, because all this was trying to understand life. It's been my lifelong goal to understand life, to understand the nature of life, to understand what was going on. So on this particular journey of trying to understand life, I came across so many things in trying to understand why it was the way it was. Why are certain people born the way they are? Why is there so much degradation towards black people in general, and why are they considered to be subpar human beings? So all these questions led me throughout my whole entire life. And so while trying to understand so many things on understand our world, I now found out that life in general was not as trustworthy as we thought, based on the people that we thought were giving us the information that we needed to answer those questions. So when we ask questions, you find out that it's going to lead you to one organization or the other, and you have to look to those organizations for truth. You have to look to maybe your politicians in your spheres of life, or your papa, your mama, your granddaddies, and everybody else who seem to have some sort of information or organized information per se. So on that journey, and it led me to Neil Armstrong a couple of years back. I'm gonna play that short clip of what Neil Armstrong said. Then we can come back and continue this primer part 2, which is very, very important. So let's do that. So I'm going to pick up the conversation of Neil Armstrong, the man who's considered to have landed on the moon, from the 4-minute mark and 55 seconds. If you're interested in watching this particular video, you can actually get on YouTube and Google Apollo 11th 25th anniversary, in which Neil Armstrong and President Bill Clinton share a platform and talk about certain things. Or you could pause the video at any point in time and please copy out that link and go look it up yourself so you can actually listen to the video. So I'm going to play this particular part of Neil Armstrong's speech so you guys can understand what I'm trying to say about how this led me to Neil Armstrong and the words that he said that sparked off, so many understanding of life and how to look, and a guide and a search for truth. Before I play this video, I would like to say that the primer video is the most important video that anybody can watch on this channel. If you do not watch any video, if you have to understand any video that we make, you have to watch the primer video first. It's the most important video that you have to watch, including this primer part 2 that we're making, which will be the last. Hopefully think this should be the last primer video that we ever make on this particular channel. So it's very, very important that you watch our primer videos first. So let me play this short clip of Neil Armstrong that I'm talking about, which led to my understanding that something else was going on in my quest and my search for truth. So I'll play that right about now.
To you we say, we've only completed a beginning. We leave you much that is undone. There are great ideas undiscovered, breakthroughs available to those who can remove one of truth's protective layers. There are places to go beyond belief. Those challenges are yours. In many fields, not the least of which is space, because there lies human destiny.
So in listening to Neil Armstrong speak, because I was so much interested in finding out what was above us and what was the world like, who created it, because remember, like I said, I grew up Roman Catholic. I went to Roman Catholic schools and everything else. I observed the Mass. I had communion and all that good stuff that comes with the Roman Catholic religion, and I actually believed that it was the truth at that point in time. So meeting Neil Armstrong and hearing those words, something now ticked off in my brain. And after what ticked off in my brain resulted in me listening to one more message on YouTube, which is about fluoride, from somebody who was talking about hip-hop music and just talking about the fact that hip-hop used to be a kind of forum in which the rap artists could give you certain very useful information, but it has been corrupted and taken over, and there's nothing useful in hip-hop or rap music anymore. And I stopped using fluoride at that point in time. Now, together with this particular message from Neil Armstrong, he now, if you heard the steps that he said that the truth has protective layers. So all through my life trying to get truth, I was always, always came in contact with a whole lot of lies, such that the truth that I had, the little truth that I thought was going to go, the right way, would skew off, and I would be very, very confused. And and you couldn't find any organization who could tell you the truth from start to bottom, because when you hear truth and you see truth, you know it because it makes sense. It just takes common sense and logic to understand it. But then with the facet of lies thrown upon us, it became very, very difficult. So even though, as we've come to discover today, that Neil Armstrong was a Mason, a Jesuit, a Roman Catholic stooge, and the whole moon landing was all fake, but I believe that in his heart of hearts, just judging from the way he spoke with so much heaviness in his heart, because being born into that situation in which he was, he couldn't come out of it. And if he came out of it, he wouldn't know what would happen to his family or the people around him. Being that a lot of people are scared of truth because of the consequences that it brings, because of the system that's organizing our world, which happens to be the Roman Catholic Church, or the Vatican as we call it. So Neil Armstrong saying those words, he spoke very cryptic messages with heaviness in his heart, because he knew the consequences of what was going to go on in our world if people didn't start waking up. Because I can play the message again and you can hear it again when he says, he's speaking to you, all right, that if you can uncover these layers of lies, or layers that covers truth, that the understanding of our world would be so much understood, that we would understand our world and so many other things that come with it. So Neil Armstrong left this message, and from Neil Armstrong's message, I was still on a quest for truth. And I started to understand that when you're looking for truth and you're looking towards the organized systems of our world, that there's always a layer of lies being pulled over the truth. So what you have to do is remove the lies and take the truth. So that's what you have to do on your quest for truth. So because of this, what Neil Armstrong's speech and everything else that he said, I started to understand life and understand truth, be able to remove the lies and take the truth that I heard. So with that, I met a couple of fellows along the way, a couple of people who were also interested in what I was interested in. And we just started, to gather all the information so we could ever find. Me in particular, I went to libraries. I read a lot of books, bought a lot of books. Some were worth it and some weren't worth it. And I came across, I think, let me see if I can find that book, if it's close by at hand, so I can talk about it. So give me 1 second. So I found the book. I came across 2 books that, in studying, trying to understand life, there were 2 books that really stand out. The first book is the Book of Job. I implore anybody, if you've ever studied the Bible and you want to understand life, maybe you've read you've read the Bible from Genesis to Revelation, the Book of Enoch, and the Apocrypha that came with it before, the Roman Catholic Church decided that they should give us 66 books instead of the 85 original books, which the people who translated the books of the Bible and compiled it into one book did. So there are 2 books that you need. It's very important that you should read. Like I said, the first one is going to be the Book of Job. If you really want to understand life, you have to study the Book of Job in depthly, because that's how I started to understand a lot of things. You really need to study the Book of Job. If you do not study any other book in the Bible, you need to study the Book of Job. When you study the Book of Job, an understanding of your world is going to make a whole lot of sense. Now, the second book that I read, not for me, I was actually on a flight going from New York to England. And on that particular flight, I've flown a lot of times across the United States to Europe. But this particular flight, the reason why I remember this flight so much is because the turbulence that we went through on that particular flight, I thought that that was going to be the end of my life. And I'm being the kind of person that I am, I have mapped out the number of years that I'm going to live and what I'm going to do through it. So I live every day knowing that I have accomplished something towards that goal. So on this particular flight, there was so much turbulence, and I was reading a book. The book is called Kissinger on the Couch. We recently had a video on Kissinger, so you could look up to it, because like I've said, if you're studying world history, you're always going to come up, to Henry Kissinger. The book is called Kissinger on the Couch. It was written by Phyllis Schlafly and Chester Ward, a Rear Admiral in the U.S. Navy, retired. It was printed by Arlington House Publishers, New Rochelle, New York. So I'm going to say it again in case anybody wants to go get the book. It's called Kissinger, if it's pronounced Kissinger or Kissinger. So this book is talking about Henry Kissinger. So it says, the title of the book again is Kissinger on the Couch by Phyllis Schlafly. I don't know if that's the right way to pronounce the name, but it's spelled Schlafly. And Chester Ward. Chester Ward was a Rear Admiral in the U.S. Navy, retired. So I was reading the book called Kissinger on the Couch. And Kissinger on the Couch explained a lot of things about a conspiracy now that's trying to run our world, and explain a lot of things that's going on, how all this fits, without actually giving us the name of who are the conspirators. So at this point in time, I'm now close to finding what was going on about, the conspirators. And then I read another book. Let me see if well, the book doesn't actually have a name, but I think it was written by somebody by the name of Fagan Myron. So Fagan Myron gave a lot of very believable stories about who the conspirators was, and that it always happens to be the Jews. So for a number of, let's say, years, I did believe that it was the Jews who ran the world, but so many things didn't add up. So many things didn't make sense. First of all, what that didn't make sense was the fact that Jews per se, if they are running the world, why are they making themselves to be a target? Because if you're trying to run a business very, very successfully, one of the things that you have to do is try to put yourself out of being a target. So that's why most people who run businesses goes by business names and, and business organizations instead of being the CEO in such a large business. Because when you do that, if somebody gets to have a problem with the business, he's going to be able to attack you directly. So you want to keep your private life out of your business life so you can function pretty much. So if you want someone to, so if someone has a problem with the business, he shouldn't be attacking your personal life, but should rather be attacking your business life. So that's the way to go in a normal business, so that at least you can still have some sort of peace in your own life. So the question now arises, if these are the Jews running the world, why are they making it known to the whole wide world that they are the problem, or the people responsible for whatever that's going on in our world? Because that would make the case for them to be annihilated very, very easy. So that was one question. The next question was because growing up, like I said before, I was very much interested in knowing about what's going on in our world, like the heavens. When I looked up at the sky, looked at the stars, looked at the moon. And like I said before, it led me to Neil Armstrong, because it was said to us that Neil Armstrong was the first man who landed on the moon. And getting to that point, I now ask the question, if the Jews are really running the world, because when you study the Bible, it talks about Jews and everything else. Why are the Jews interested in landing in the moon, in the stars, and everything else? Because, and it's such theories as like, the Big Bang theory, that we were created from a Big Bang or evolution. Because if you believed in all that, the very idea of being Jewish doesn't become so Jewish. So if these Jews are running the world, why are they pushing forward the idea of the Big Bang theory, evolution, and other such theories that remove the concept of God out of it? So those two questions laid a very big hole in my belief system that it was Jews that was running the world. And meanwhile, I didn't know that the organization that has trained me, yes, I'm Roman Catholic trained. Some people may think about it like maybe I'm a Jesuit at this point in time. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter how you care that I was trained, but I am Roman Catholic trained, and that is the truth, and that is the fact, and that will always be a fact in my life. So I never knew that the very organization that was training me was the one doing all things. So there became a conflict in the sense that every time you go looking for truth, you find that these two entities come up, the Jews and the Roman Catholics. And if you're just going down the line of believing the concept of the stories around you, you're going to end up believing that it's the Jews who actually run the world. And another thing that came up confusing about history, besides the fact that you come up with these two entities, is the fact that our world is divided into a black and white status. So, for example, when studying history, you come up with you're going to go through like Roman history, Greek history. I'm not going to feature per se on Babylonian history because that's very, very important as well, and all those histories all through that timeline. And you tend to find out that when you show up with these histories, you're gonna be faced with a dilemma of asking these questions. If the current status in a world in which black people are degraded and made to be subpar human beings, you find out that there is always somebody that comes out of that history who happens to be black with woolly hair. And meanwhile, what we are taught in the schools, when we are taught through the media, will tell you, okay, it's people with straight hair. So it's always that conflict. So we didn't know which one is which. So, and that was just something we had to bear in mind while keeping up the truth, or I in mind while trying to understand the truth of our world. So we came faced up with those three major questions: the Jews, the Roman Catholics, and whose identity throughout history has it always been? Because we have been made to believe, for example, through a lot of the media, that the Egyptians have straight hair and pale skin. And when you don't know how to study the Bible and looking up, like I said before, looking up to a lot of the organized people, organized religion of this world to give you answers, they seem to not give you the answers. They just talk about certain things, but they don't really give you the answers. So there was no answers. So those were the three problems that we faced, or the three problems that I faced, rather. I don't know much about how or what the team came up with, but this was the major problem. So we were always in discussion, talking about, why and who these three entities were, because it will always come to that point in which you're confused about those three entities, trying to find out which one is which, or which one actually is responsible for our world. So being that the Jews, we've been taught that it's the Jews that run the world and everything else, and that but when you read through major history, you start seeing a particular pattern. If you're paying attention to the history that you're reading about, it always seems that the person who happened to be either a Jesuit or working for a Jesuit or having some sort of relationship with the Jesuit. And when you're related with the Jesuit, that means you're related with the Roman Catholic Church or Roman Catholic history. So now that made me take a pause and decide to study the religion that I grew up in, the religion that has trained me, to find out the truth. So the very first person I would look up to was my dad. My dad gave me a lot of history about the Roman Catholic Church, and he himself was one of those Roman Catholics who actually doesn't like the history of the Roman Catholic Church behind, because we've been made to believe that the Roman Catholic Church history is no longer the same history it is today. That means the Roman Catholic Church is far removed from the bad history of killing a lot of people in the name of God, which happened to be black people at that point in time, and so many other people. And my dad used to so much hate the history behind, but he would always say, him and my mom would always say that a lot of the Protestant churches which they tried to move into were rather taking people's money, which is the truth, and feeding people with a lot of lies and fake miracles. So the best solace that they could find would always be to go back to the Roman Catholic Church, which is the whole idea behind how the religion of this world is organized today. Being that the Roman Catholic Church runs the organizations that bring out a lot of preachers, like the seminaries and the theological schools, the idea is to bankrupt religion or Christianity, or whatever name you want to call it, into being a very false belief system, such that people will only find solace and stop being heartbroken by coming back to the Roman Catholic Church, which they believe is the first church. So I now had to study my own religion that I grew up in. And from then I started seeing certain things that led me to understand that it was the Roman Catholic Church, because I found all the answers and questions on history, because they were all written by the Roman Catholic Church, and then the Jews were used as the front. But for much more of that understanding, when you get a book, that's why I advise everybody to get a book, because we've done an in-depth history into a world, and you cannot deny the truth that you'll find in a book. So if you're interested in a book, please send us an email. The email is the name of the channel, which is Tricks of the S Trade @gmail.com. That is our email. So getting on to the story of why we are arriving at the Primer 2 video here. So the reason for the channel in the first place was it was just something, an idea that crept up into my mind per se, not something that I really discussed about with the people that I had been working with and asking a lot of questions about life and trying to understand what's going on. And the reason for this is that after discovering all this truth and coming to the reality of the entity and organization who runs our world, and being the fact that I got tired of, watching the news, looking at movies, because I already knew that the people who are running it are the people who trained me and everything else. I came up with a very particular trend, because YouTube was one of the places that I could go to just to, find something to watch. And I came up on a particular trend of meeting people who didn't look like the gender they claimed. So while looking at a lot of these people and getting involved with a lot of YouTube channels, from Mr. E 3000, there are so many transgender channels out there, and Mr. E 3000 stands out of one of the first, and so many other transgender channels. I found out that they tell you a little bit of truth, and then they tell you also a lot of behemoth of lies. I came up to I was like, but this is not right. This person is actually not a transgender, but you're calling the person a transgender. So I just found out that a lot of these channels were being set up just for, I don't know, it's set up for what I would call the shock value of it, or they were trying to get as many subscribers as they can. So because YouTube pays people who have a lot of subscribers, and when you have ads running, you make a lot of money. So I didn't quite understand it, if that was the case. But what I couldn't stand the fact was that people were getting very confused day in and night, as much as I was confused while growing up. And so I decided to start writing letters. So that's what I did. So a lot of the people, the people that I knew that we have all these discussions with, were telling me it's a waste of time. There's no need for you to be writing letters to these people. But I was like, okay, I'm still gonna write to them and tell them that they are wrong on so many things. So I wrote to Mr. E3000. I wrote to John Humanity. There's so many other transgender channels. I wrote to Apostle Laura Lee and all those transgender channels out on YouTube, trying to tell them, okay, look, you guys are doing this wrong. You're slandering people, and you're making people so confused based on the confusion that's being spread around already. And knowing the people behind it, because if you grew up in a Roman Catholic institution, a Roman Catholic household like I know, you would know that castratos are something that is common in the Roman Catholic history, being the fact that a lot of abuses have been going on throughout the Roman Catholic Church based on the Catholic priest, dedication to being celibate in his life. So I knew for a fact that a lot of castrato singers, for example, my dad used to love listening to the castratos. I mean, not castratos, but the opera singers sing, and we could find out that a lot of them were castrated men who actually had these beautiful notes. So my dad would spend money to go to an opera, watch it in New York or wherever he could find this opera singers would. It was something that he loved doing. I hated the opera, so I never would ever go with him, and I would just shy out, and him and my mom, whatever the case, would have their own little thing. So I knew for a fact that as usual, the Roman Catholic institution that I was involved with, that trained me, would be the people who churned out a lot of these castratos. And so writing to all these transgender channels, from Jungle Surfer to the rest, and trying to make them to see that what they were doing was very, very bad, that they were having a lot of very confused people on the subject of the agenda, and looking at the way the world was going, because you have to understand that I and the team, I per se, came to an understanding of all this truth, but the truth was just, something I just could keep. I couldn't talk about it to anybody because it wouldn't make any sense trying to, talk to somebody about something that they have no clue or understanding with. So I didn't know how to. I wasn't thinking about putting all this information together or anything at all. But all I was interested about was the fact that a lot of the transgender channels were putting out so much false information about how to identify the gender. And after trying to write to them and sending them letters, I decided to make a document. So when I finished the document, I consulted with a friend of mine, and it happened to be, the conversation went that well, it's a good idea, but we don't think if it's gonna work. So I put the document together, and I would send these letters to these people on my own and tell them, okay, please, what you're doing is wrong. You're actually, not doing this right. You're making a lot of people confused. And someone would write back and just tell me that I was confused myself. I was, stupid and everything else. So, but every time I got to watch and seeing the fact that one of the most annoying characters that I've ever met in this particular transgender thing, that made me say, okay, it's about time I do something about it. I don't care what, I don't think I should be discussing this with anybody else. I'm just going to tell them about it after I do it. If they're with me, then they're with me. If they're not, then that's fine. So one of the most annoying characters, two annoying characters that I met, I'll say one. Let me be in particular. One annoying character was Floyd Money Mayweather. Because, I don't know if anybody's like me, but looking at Floyd Money Mayweather, I would be saying, oh, that's a girl trying to wear my boxer briefs. Okay, why is she so loud-mouthed and boasty and everything else, talking like the world runs around her? So that was one of the most annoying characters I've ever had, because every day I looked, I could tell that this was a woman, but there was no way. And the public was being deceived every day, being that the Roman Catholic Church, the Vatican, runs our world as it is. So I was like, okay, the very first video I'm going to make was on Floyd Money Mayweather after that. So I now decided to create the YouTube channel. But little did I know that the Vatican is interested in every single thing, because we know that the Vatican owns everything that we use to communicate or work with our world. I didn't know that the Roman Catholic Church was that big and powerful, the institution that I was raised up in. So this led to I decided to create the channel rather. And after creating the channel, the people that I usually consult with and talk about certain things, because they're the only people I could discuss certain things with, now said, wow, it's a good idea. So after making like the first let's say 10 videos or 12 videos trying to make people to understand the difference in the genders, we started noticing a trend that what use would it be that all the information that we've gathered over the years, all right, and keeping it to ourselves, and keeping it to myself in particular, of what good is it if the only thing that matters is how people need to identify the genders, which is the most basic thing that anybody should be able to do, because we're either born as male and female. So it sounded like it was a very low degree of understanding that humanity only wants to understand the difference between the genders, all right? And so we were like, this sounds very retarded. How come we're talking about only the genders when this is something that everybody should know? So based on that, we now found out that the world was confused on so many things, and if we're confused about our genders, then that means we're done. We're no longer a humanity. So I impressed upon myself that I'm going to start talking about other things just to make people understand the world. And that's how we arrived on this particular document that you're looking at, because we now found out the Roman Catholic Church runs the world through a lot of mutilated people, male and female. So here's the story for the primer part 2 video now all put together. So you would have to have watched the primer video first, which I'm gonna show to you right now. Here's the primer video. You should have watched this. It's the most important video. Like we say, the primer videos are the most important videos that you have to watch on this channel, primer. And after watching that primer video, get to the channel, look for the playlist. It's called Primer, or Primer itself, a video. It will be the oldest video on this channel, and watch it. So the reason for the part 2 video now is to put everything in perspective so you can understand the story from start to finish. So first of all, you have to understand that, one, the Roman Catholic Church, or the Vatican as we call it, runs our world and runs all governments. And the second thing that you have to understand is that they use a lot of mutilated males and females to do so. Please get a book for a full understanding of this. We're not just trying to sell you a book. We're trying to make you understand your world. So if you're just watching the videos will not do enough good for you, because there's so many things we cannot say on these videos. The book will explain everything that we know, that I know in particular. So you understand that if you've watched the primer videos, that the Roman Catholic Church runs the world, and they use a lot of castrated males, or castrated people in general, not just males, mutilated males, I would call it. So why does the Roman Catholic Church decide to use a lot of castrated people, and then also use Jews as a decoy? Because I mean, if you've watch the primer video, this particular link here that I'm highlighting right here and copying, like I'm moving my mouse over, which talks about the fact that the Roman Catholic Church owns Hollywood, is written itself by a Roman Catholic institution called Reddit, because the Roman Catholic Church owns Reddit. They just put up this particular forum up there on Reddit for people, it's more like a mockery, just to let you guys know that they are the ones running it and that you're going in the wrong direction. This is for people who are really interested in the truth. It's just for them to make themselves known without being known. So you can pause the video at any point in time, copy out this link. It's still active on Reddit, so you can go read up on it. And So when you copy, this led to this, the primer video led to the creation of this document just to lead people in the right direction to understanding why the Roman Catholic Church actually runs Hollywood. And a lot of people, and a lot of these mutilated people that we see, or transgenders as they call it, happen to be in Hollywood. And the reason why a lot of these castrated or mutilated people are in Hollywood is to serve as a distraction so that you do not look at the castrated people or mutilated people, rather to say, let me use the right words, mutilated people in politics who are actually making the legislation and laws that run your world, especially in the Western world. There are more mutilated politicians in the Western world than the so-called world that they call second world or third world countries. So that is what you have to understand, that this whole Hollywood of showing us a lot of mutilated males and mutilated females is a distraction. So you do not see, so you do not keep your eye on the politicians who are the most mutilated people in the world. Okay? So that's what you have to get from watching this particular primer video, because we're trying to put everything in perspective so you understand that. So the question now, the next question somebody will ask is, if these people are mutilated or transgendered, okay, what is the reason? Why are these people mutilated or transgendered, as a lot of people will say? So the answer to that question is this. When the current people who run the Vatican, who happen to be albinic, because like I've said, when you're studying history, you're going to come up with the 3 questions you have to understand, 3 questions you're going to face rather, and those 3 questions have to have answers for you to understand what you're dealing with. You're going to come in contact with the Jews, you're going to come in contact with the Roman Catholic Church, and you're going to come in contact with the with white supremacy or albino supremacy. So if you do not pass through those 3 questions, then you're never ever going to come to reality of what's going on in the world. So when we found out that it was the Jews, and then we also answered the question of albino supremacy, so that's how we came to understand that the Roman Catholic Church is a white supremacist organization today, which is not always been. So going back to the reason why castrated or mutilated people are used to run our world, when the albinos came into world history, they were trained. A lot of them trained because a lot of them were when they were taking over the power structures of the world. Instead of killing off the black monarchs that were running the world, some of the black monarchs, not all of them, some of the black monarchs that they thought that could give them access to a lot of the information that because you have to understand that our world was run by woolly-haired people for a very long time, and they were very, very powerful monarchs up until the 1400s. Let's say that the 1400s to be the actual date. So when this albino people came in from Asia and were taking over a lot of the power structures of the world, they met with so many black monarchs. So what would be the game? So they faced a dilemma of asking the question: if we kill them off, a lot of the knowledge that they have is going to go with them. Some they killed and some they didn't. So what they did was to breed with a lot of these woolly-haired monarchs around the world and try to gain the knowledge after making them subservient to them. So what happened was, during that interaction, they found out that the keepers of the books of this crazy occult books and crazy occult histories that the black monarchs were using to run the world, that some of them were very dedicated and loyal servants, loyal to the death. And most of these dedicated and loyal servants to the death happen to be castrated males in most cases that were doing this. And people who were keeper of secrets, like a lot of eunuchs that were guarding the secrets, the so-called terrible secrets of what they think actually gives them power, were actually castrated people. And castrated people have a very narrow mindset. Why do they have a narrow mindset? Because when you castrate or mutilate somebody, the person ceases to function as a normal human being. All right? Because the person can go out and intermingle with other people who are not like him. So, for example, when a male castrates himself or becomes transgender, his whole sphere of contact in his world becomes very limited and very small. Because immediately he's transgendered, he's not going to be able to go and sit with other males who are not and act like everything is normal. Somebody's going to notice and people are going to know that something's wrong with you. All right? And you yourself are not going to be able to interact with other normal, regular human beings. So when you do that, the sphere of your world becomes very small. That means your relationships becomes very limited, and you have very limited people that you can actually interact with. And when you have limited people that you interact with, what you know becomes very limited. So that's the way it works. So this is what the albinos from Asia who were taking over a lot of the black power structures in Europe were doing. They found that these castrated or mutilated people who were keepers of secrets, who were also temple prostitutes, occultic temple prostitutes, and were also priests to a lot of this so-called underground religions that the black monarchs were using, were very dedicated in their fields, because these people had no other life, because they couldn't function outside of their castrated or mutilated selves. So this gave the albino lords who took over the Vatican and took over much of the control structures of power at the time of Europe at the time, because Europe was the main control structure of world power after it's moved out from Africa into Europe per se, because Europe is still Africa. There's people, a lot of people don't understand. Europe is Africa. Don't worry about the Mediterranean Sea and the way that the albino supremacists today has made us to say that that part of the world is called Europe. It was never called Europe. It was always Africa. That Mediterranean Sea is just a sea in between the landmass that they call Europe, which is still Africa. All right. So when this albino supremacists took over a lot of those things, instead of killing a lot of the black monarchs outrightly, they inbreeded with them. All right. They believed that inbreeding with them would give them some sort of royal bloodline. And then from there, they got to study all of this mutilated males and females, and decided that the best way to run the world in such a way, because knowing that albinism is a recessive trait, and that there are more black people in the world than all the albinos combined in any way, because this is something that a lot of people don't understand as well. Africa is the largest continent in the world and fits almost every continent in it. This is a basic fact that a lot of people do not understand. There are more black people in Africa than the rest of the world combined. I'm not talking about blacks outside of the African continent. I'm saying the whole world combined. There is more people in Africa than the whole world combined together. And then secondly, there are more black people, all right, than people with albinic skin, or that means people with pale skin and straight hair. But when the albino lords came into contact with this, and knowing that albinism is a recessive trait, and they're not going to be able to survive long if they can't control the mindset of the majority of the population that they seek to control, that their doom would be very, very closed off. So they now decided, how can we make sure that we will have servile slaves who will keep perpetuating so many of this falsehood, because it's now a matter of mind control over the physical cells. Because what they found out, that a lot of these woolly-haired Europeans who were running Europe and running the world from the last remnants of the Roman Empire were doing so through mind control, through telling stories, because telling stories is much something that it's found very, very much in African culture. In African culture, there is a lot of storytelling, and a lot of things are not written into books. It was the woolly-haired, let's say, African Europeans, because they are all Europeans are Africans, that decided to put a lot of the information of storytelling into books. That's how we have so many books nowadays, and that's how the Bible came forth. So when this happened, the albino people who came into Europe from Asia, because they're all Asians, a lot of people get confused about the fact that most so-called Europeans, or and maybe people around the world that have pale skin and straight hair don't look like Asians, is because as they moved out of Asia and bred with so many other woolly-haired Europeans, the Asian characteristics of those slant eyes, which is became removed, and they picked up so many of the woolly-haired characteristics, or woolly-haired, let's say, features that those nations that they were conquering, that they took over. So a lot of those Asian features became lost. So that's just what happened. So getting back to the story, the albino masters now decided, okay, we are a minority. The majority of the world, 3/4 of the world, is black with woolly hair, which is the truth. We have to create servile slaves, people who will carry, or who will live their lives only for the purpose that they've been created for, to make sure that they keep perpetuating the mind control stories which will make the public believe in their own superiority. It will make the public believe in the albinic superiority over black woolly-haired people. All right? So picking up from where these black woolly-haired kings left off, they created the document that's called the Protocols of Zion. So from the Protocols of Zion, they decided that what they would have to do was to create distractions from people looking at the core organizing people of this world, which happens to be the Roman Catholic institution led by the albino supremacists today. They have to create a diversion. So the diversion has to be on layers and layers and layers of lies and storytelling. So that's what Neil Armstrong was trying to say, that truth is covered by a lot, of falsities or falsehoods around it. So the first layer, first of all, was to create people of servile, whose lives would only be what they have been trained to be in. So it's from then that they started castrating males and mutilating the females. Because once you castrate someone, the sphere of contact the person is supposed to contact and live as a normal life becomes very, very limited. And from that limited, narrow mindset in life, you can train that child in such a way that the only thing that he or she finds any type of joy for being alive is what you've trained him or her in. So that was the idea about mutilating people, or transgendering them, as they say. So that is the question that you have to that we have answered up to that point, for you to understand the reason for the transgenders. Now, the next question I believe that we should answer is this. A lot of people come to meet up with transgenders, and they are told by the media and the public that these transgenders have children. And people always have a misunderstanding of trying to say, they come to the fact that why is it that the children of these transgenders who cannot be able to give birth to any of these babies, how come that they look like them? So the question on how we answer is that, because we've already tried to answer that in a couple of videos, is the fact that a lot of siblings, that when the Roman Catholic Church creates a lot of this transgendered people, they also make them have some sort of normalcy by making them have siblings, and some of these siblings are not transgendered. So some of these siblings, since they're also trained in a very narrow mindset as well, will be trained to carry children for their transgendered siblings. And case in point, we've talked about in a video before of Solange Knowles being the surrogate mom for Beyonce's children. And people still ask the question, but these siblings or these children very much look like their transgendered parents. So one thing you have to understand is that there is such a thing as plastic surgery. Plastic surgery is used to make the children also look like their transgendered parents per se. So that means if a transgendered parent, for example, has a surrogate sibling, or anybody who's a surrogate who's going to be carrying the baby for them, to make it look like they were the people who got pregnant with these children or have these children per se. As the children grow older, they are put through some sort of plastic surgery to make them look like their transgendered parents, to sell the belief that these transgendered people can actually give birth and keep on using them to control our reality and our world. So that is the story of the Primer 2 video. We hope it's going to be the last Primer video that we make, because we want people to understand the whole idea of the channel and the reason why we created it, and to answer your question on how a lot of these transgenders can have children and make them appear to be like they gave birth to them. It's through plastic surgery and through the use of siblings. And the reason for the transgenders is to use to control our reality. And the transgenders in Hollywood are actually a decoy from you looking at the main people who are used to control our reality, which are the people in politics, who are the most transgendered people in the world today. And the institution that runs our world and makes these transgenders possible hasn't changed. It remains the Vatican, the Roman Catholic Church, and is run by albino, or as they call, white supremacists, selling us the idea through a lot of movies and a lot of stuff that we read that there are more albino people in the world than black people, which is obviously very false, and a lot of people actually believe this. 3/4 of the world is made of black woolly haired people. They are the majority because they have the dominant genes, and albinism is a recessive trait. So that is the whole idea of making this Primer 2. We hope it's going to be the last Primer video that we make, so you can understand the story from start to finish. I hope it wasn't a long video, but if it was, then pardon me, but that's it. So with that, please get our book. It's very, very important that you do get our book. We're not just trying to sell you a book. We're trying to make you understand the truth, so you do not have just a very basic mode or primal mode of living, in that you only know about transgenders. Because these videos will go away. The Vatican will shut us down one day. And if you have these videos on your hard drive, your phones, you've downloaded it, you have to understand that those will go away too, because they will get corrupted, because there is already a timing device in every digital media that will corrupt it. And it's there for a purpose, so people will not have a lot of information. The Vatican is trying to make you go digital so that you can lose that information. That's the best way I can tell you. That is the truth. They will have it, but you will lose it. All right? So please get our book, so that all through history, books which have always been the reason that has passed information from generation to generation will remain, because once you get a book, you have it for life. You can always pass it on, and someone can always read it in its uncorrupted versions and know the truth. If you're interested in a book, send us an email. Email the same as the channel name, tricksofthestrade2@gmail.com or tricksofthestrade@gmail.com. We have 2 emails, but for those 2, you can send us an email on tricksofthestrade@gmail.com. Primarily, if you do not get a response from tricksofthestrade@gmail.com, send us an email on tricksofthestrade2@gmail.com and get our book. We thank you, all our great subscribers, and we thank you for allowing us to make you understand your world. And I leave you with these words, as I usually say: look with your eyes, but see with your brain. Thanks, and bye-bye.